It is Friday, April 29th. Let's talk PlayStation. Hello everyone, welcome back. We have a lot to go over. So first up, as always, our PS Plus reminder. Make sure you grab those April games before they go away. May 3rd, it's going to change over to FIFA 22 on PS4 and PS5, Tribes of Midgard, PS4 and PS5 as well, and then also Curse of the Dead Gods on PS4. Not really a great month, I would say. It's something where, well, you know how I feel about sports games. It's not like they're bad, but, you know, FIFA is a really huge franchise, right? It does really well on its own, so chances are if you wanted this game, I'm going to assume you already got it. And if you didn't get it, there might be a reason for that, which is you don't care about sports games, right? So, I don't know, that's how I see it. That's why I've never really liked major sports games launching on PS Plus. But besides that, I would say Tribes of Midgard, totally worth checking out, so that's pretty cool. But the reason why we have a lot to go over is that, well, we got a ton of news regarding the PS Plus service relaunch, which we are expecting very soon. We thought June, but actually it's now as soon as May 23rd, where Sony recently outlined on the PlayStation blog that they have new targeted release, not windows, their release dates, but they do specify that they're targeting these dates. So for example, May 23rd would be for the Asia markets, excluding Japan. Japan would be June 1st, 2022. The Americas would be June 13th, and then unfortunately Europe is on the bottom here, June 22nd. Not a major difference, but that's our lineup, and hopefully it will be ready by at least May 23rd, so we can at least talk about the service as soon as possible. And also, probably noteworthy here, at least for Europe, is that we finally have expansion for streaming functionality. We all know that's the one big problem of PS Now as it stands, where for the entire time it's been around, there's a lot of countries where it's not available. Now, with this new relaunch, Sony's going to be expanding the streaming functionality, which would apply to PS Plus Premium, to Bulgaria, Croatia, Czech Republic, Greece, Malta, Poland, a few other places as well, so that's good. And again, there's still plenty of missing places here, a lot of countries that are still MIA, but at least they're finally doing something here when it comes to expanding the streaming functionality. But I would also say, again, that's kind of a low priority. Most people don't want to stream games, and that's still very true today and for the foreseeable future. Anyway, though, we did finally get a good idea of what kind of games will be available on PS Plus Premium in that Classic Games lineup by way of games getting rated again on the career ratings board for PS4 and PS5. So recently we saw that Siphon Filter 1, 2, Dark Mirror, and Logan Shadow were rated again on PS4 and PS5. Of course, these are PS1 and PSP games, so very likely this is for PS Plus Premium. We saw that, and also more directly on the PSN backend, new title IDs and art assets for Tekken 2, Mr. Driller, Ridge Racers 2, Worms World Party, and Worms Armageddon. Those titles recently showed up on the PSN backend. So yeah, those are also for PS Plus Premium. And well, at the very least, we finally have an idea of what kind of games will show up. It's a small selection there, all PS1 and PSP, so no new PS2 games just yet, because there is going to be a difference there when it comes to the current PS2 games that we have on the store. Again, I expect these titles to not have trophies. Whatever else they have, you know, at a minimum, we have to do something about the resolution. But otherwise, the new PS2 games, I expect those won't have trophies, but there will be a difference there. We don't have any PS2 games just yet, but yeah, we're probably going to see more games show up this way via the PSN backend or them getting rated again, because we still don't have the official lineup. And at this point, it's probably worth noting that based on that release schedule for the different regions, there's going to be some variances when it comes to the kind of games available in Asia, Japan versus Europe, North America. I mean, likely North America and Europe may be very similar or the exact same, but the big difference will probably be some games that are available only in the Eastern territories versus what we are going to get in the West. But I digress. It's just that we don't have the official lineup just yet, and I know a lot of people keep asking, can we buy these games individually? We don't know that just yet as I'm filming, because this stuff keeps coming out so soon, but I expect that they will. You have to remember, the only time Sony's ever actually let you, well, I should say, the only time Sony hasn't let you buy something on PSN, as far as I know, I'm sure there's other fringe cases, but the most obvious one is they've never let you buy PS3 streaming, right? Because that would be a bit weird. That's kind of like Stadia, which, you know, a lot of people find that to be very weird, but they've never let you do that. You can only, well, initially rent individual PS3 streams, then it went to a subscription-based model, but they've never let you say, pay $15 and you own the stream for Final Fantasy 13, right? They've never done that. So I expect individual purchases. If they don't, of course, they're going to have a big problem, and I think even if they didn't let you do it, they'll get yelled at so much that they'll let you do it eventually, but we don't know that just yet. Now, when it comes to, excuse me, the classic games, Sony put out that number, 340 additional titles, and that sounds okay, but the discrepancy is that we have nearly 500 classic games, which would be split across PS2 and 3, and it's largely PS3 streaming. So if we're going from nearly 500 to 340 split across PS1, 2, 3, and PSP, that implies we're losing a lot of PS3, right? So is it really additional, or is it something where we're losing a lot of games? Well, we might actually be losing some titles here, because over on the PlayStation Now subreddit, one user noticed that there's now a lot of expiration dates for various games across PS4 and PS3, mostly PS3, and the two big publishers here is Konami and Sega. For Sega, at least, we know that they're launching the Sonic Origins collection that was recently announced, and there's actually some delistings across PlayStation, I think also Nintendo, but also Xbox, so that would explain why we're losing things like various Sonic games across PS4 and PS3, but by May 3rd, we're losing on PS4 things like NBA 2K18, Exile's End, May 17th, Destroy All Humans, MGS5, that's a big one, Sonic Forces, PS3, the list is a bit bigger here, so things like Catherine, Crazy Taxi, MGS4, also, again, Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic 4, Episode 1 and 2, Sonic the Fighters, Sonic Generations. Also, we're losing actually the Silent Hill HD collection. So yeah, a decent amount of stuff is leaving there, but that could simply be explained by Sony either working out new licenses, which will launch once the new service is ready, or perhaps they couldn't work something out, right? It would be hard to imagine a situation where Sony doesn't work out a deal with two very large publishers that have very beloved classic IP for, a new service that is, based on having a lineup of classic titles. So it's hard to imagine a situation where that's not happening, but this might imply where the PS3 stuff is going. It might be expiring. Although it is worth noting that Sony recently sent out a promotional email to users, finally confirming that yes, there will be new titles added on a monthly basis for PS Plus Extra and Premium. We expect that for Essential because that service is staying largely the same as what PS Plus is today. But, what about the upper tiers? It seems like, yes, that will be a monthly update for new games and also things that may possibly leave. So in theory, the 340, if that is the new number across all those PlayStation platforms, it could get larger over time. That's good, but at least we have an idea of what might be happening to the PS3 stuff. We might be losing a lot of PS3 games as we were theorizing. But anyway, the really big story that happened here was that Sony finally confirmed what happens if you have both Plus and Now, and let's say PS Plus is your longer of the two subscriptions, right? We already knew what happens if you have PS Now. If you have PS Now, with or without Plus, you're getting moved into Premium. We just didn't know what happens if you have both, and let's say Plus is longer than PS Now. Well, we know that regardless of having both, whichever one is the longer end date, that one is getting moved to Premium. So that means, in theory, everybody can get Premium if you subscribe to PS Now, which you can do on a month-to-month basis, right? We talked about how that exploit came out shortly after they announced this, where they were pulling PS Now cards and not letting you subscribe per year with PS Now. And it was obvious why they were doing that, because you could, get moved into Premium at half off. When this came out a few days ago, I was like, oh, so the loophole is open again, because that means you can just stack years of PS Plus, and then you can subscribe to PS Now on a month-to-month basis. Who cares if it's only $10 a month, because once the service change happens in June, you're automatically moved into Premium, and you could get, again, the half-off deal, or nearly half off, accounting for the $10 of PS Now, right? So that seemed like a great deal, and that's what people were doing, but it looks like Sony actually blocked that as well. So temporarily they've stopped people from stacking years of PS Plus. And this is confirmed from Sony. You can't stack years of PS Plus if you are currently subscribed to PS Plus. So people were, trying to do it on the console, and I think it's blocked there, but people were actually buying cards from, Amazon, GameStop, wherever else, and entering the cards, and it wasn't working because they've temporarily blocked it for what I would assume is, a month or so until the service is relaunched. And so people are understandably not very pleased about this because the loophole is, blocked again. And it's not a good look when, and whether you like it or not, comparables are going to be drawn, and Microsoft has been willingly letting people take advantage of that, conversion thing they have going on where you can buy up to 3 years of Xbox Live Gold and for $1 convert it to Game Pass. It's honestly kind of shocking that they still let people do that, but, well, maybe it's not so shocking when, they're loss leading. They don't care to lose the money. They just want subscribers. They're willing to spend the money on big publishers, first-party games going day one, third-party deals, and of course something like that, where they probably guess that most people aren't, taking advantage of that, or at least most consumers, but if people do it, they kind of turn a blind eye to it, right? And that's just in perpetuity for now, right? The weird thing about Sony is that this would have only been a problem for like a month and a half, barely, because once these services are relaunched, then this wouldn't work anymore. Then you would have to pay $120 for PS Plus Premium. So I get that it's a loophole and they were protecting their bottom line. It's a very Sony thing for them to block this. It's just, honestly, I kind of thought, you didn't let people just do this. We're talking 40, 50 million PS Plus subscribers. The vast majority of those people are not going to be taking advantage of this. Why don't you just let a few, 10, 20,000 people, however many people were trying to do this, why don't you just let them get away with it? I mean, I don't know. It's just one of those things where, again, the optics don't look very good. Comparables are drawn, and just doesn't really look that good on Sony's end. But at the very least, we can say that if you have pre-bought PS Plus for years, which some people have absolutely done, I've seen it go as high as 2031, 2032. I'm not even sure if there's a cap on that, but if you do have PS Plus pre-bought for a few years, then as long as the language doesn't change here and Sony doesn't block anything else, then you would probably want to make sure you're subscribed to PS Now before this service changeover to convert all those years to premium. So at least that's good. You've got time if you have PS Plus pre-bought. Now, the other kind of weird thing that we found out was more info for Sony's full game trials for PlayStation Plus Premium, where we know that's going to be a perk for that top tier of the service. And it seems like that might actually apply to a lot of games because, as reported by GameDeveloper.com and also Kotaku, there was a new notice on Sony's developer web portal that had a mandate for games with a wholesale price of $34 or more must have a 2-hour trial starting somewhere around now. So it's not a retroactive thing, but if you're shipping a game on PlayStation in the future with a $34 wholesale price, it must have a 2-hour trial. That trial must be the actual game and not a specialized demo, though Sony is open to that idea on a case-by-case basis. And the trials don't have to be ready at launch, but it must be available within 3 months of the game's release. And the trial will be available for a year once it's actually out. And also, Sony's PlayStation Store team will handle making the trials, so it's not something that the developers have to do. This was confirmed, or rather reported on by Ethan Gatch of Kotaku, but it seems like Sony will actually take care of this. And also, there's no compensation to developers for this new mandate, and that's where there's a bit of concern. And that's where I fall on all this. It's something where I look at it from every point of view, right? So the consumer, the developer, the publisher, Sony, and in that equation, is everybody going to be happy? And that's where I would say developers and publishers are not going to be psyched about this at all. Historically, demos and trials, they don't always convert into full game sales. Sometimes they do more harm than good. And there's a very obvious relationship of, is the game good? Then you're likely to get a sale. If it's not, there's no way you're getting a sale. But publishers, they won't really admit this to you outright, but they don't really want you to play their game before you decide to buy it. That's why during the PS4 days, we never got that as a commonplace feature of streaming PS4 games as a way to try them before you buy them. If you remember, that's when David Perry, the CEO of Gaikai, announced that during the PS4 reveal, and then years later, during an interview when he left Sony, he admitted that when he approached publishers about this feature, they didn't want to do it because they told him, David, we don't want people to play our games. before they buy them, the trailer and the commercials, those do a better job to sell the game because let's say the game's not good, or in the context the game's not good, we don't want people to play it. So, I mean, that was a very open and honest answer that David, put out there, and we kind of knew that for a long time anyway. If the game's not good, they don't really want you to play it. So it's a very consumer-friendly thing, no doubt, but I would imagine most developers and publishers are not going to be too happy about this, especially when there's no compensation either. But at least the PS Store team will take care of it, so I would imagine most games it's going to be the full game trial instead of a specialized demo, because those are a huge pain to put together, and that's why those kind of went the way of the dodo a long time ago. So yeah, it is a consumer-friendly thing, no doubt. It does help Sony's bottom line as another perk for PS Plus Premium. And it's also very commonplace on Steam. That's, it's free. Anybody can do it. You can play a game for 2 hours, and that's also why developers often don't like it, because that's a system on Steam that seems to be abused on a kind of a regular basis for some people, where they can play a game and play most of the content depending on that game. If it's linear, if it's small scale, it's you can get a return, no questions asked, and that's obviously not cool. But yeah, for the consumer, it's not bad. If this does apply to most major releases, then I think that might actually be a decent perk that would consider, or rather would entice people to maybe subscribe if, say, the classic games, and obviously the streaming isn't really going to do much for you, so not terrible. And of course, more comparisons are being made of, as you would expect, full-scale games on Game Pass versus 2-hour trials on PS Plus Premium. Be that as it may, it's something where it's still a very handy perk that wasn't there before, and well, as we've explained countless times before, you can't really compare the two. They're very clearly, two different services that are structured in two very different ways. And also, if we really want to go down that route, I think an argument could easily be made of, Game Pass is kind of an all or nothing thing. If it's not on Game Pass, then you have to pay for it full price and not try it before you play, right? Not every game hits Game Pass. This might be actually somewhat invaluable to the right consumer, where they want to try every major release, and now they might have the option to before they buy, right? Every major release for 2 hours versus, a handful of major releases. There's, if we want to go down that route, there's pros and cons to both, right? So it's not necessarily bad, but again, certainly one where with developers and publishers, I'm like, yeah, right away, I can't see how they would be thrilled about this. Anyway, moving on to our next news story. PlayStation recently hired a brand new engineer, Garrett Fredley, formerly a VA, and his job announcement on his Twitter and LinkedIn caught a lot of attention, where he says, and I quote here, "Today is my first day as a senior build engineer at PlayStation, working as one of their initial hires for their newly created preservation team. Game preservation was my first career passion, so I'm ecstatic that I get to go back to those roots." Now, a lot of people saw this and they thought this had something to do with emulation or bringing back old games or something like that, and a day later he had to, clarify this, where he says, "So apparently I broke the internet announcing my work with PlayStation. For anyone asking what game preservation is or what I do, I did a GDC talk a few years ago on the subject when I worked at EA. My work is similar, although larger in scope. To be determined on whether I'll have much of a role to play personally in any emulation work, although I'll share what I can when it comes up. It's only my second day." So yeah, that's something we really should get across here. Preservation does not always equal or mean emulation or bringing back older titles. Preservation, in the simplest definition, means preserving something, right? So it doesn't, I see how it goes hand in hand, but what Garrett is going to be doing is actually archiving games that are released today, or presumably very recent games that were released within the past year and a half, games coming out today, games coming out in the future. That's what this team is responsible for, is archiving that source code, art, assets, and making sure the game is properly archived for the future. And that is still good news on its own, but that's what this job is. Because the problem with the games business for a long time, and we have even more recent examples, but going back 15, 20 years, a lot of developers and publishers were not archiving their work properly. Some games are truly lost to time where there is no source code, or the source code is lost, let's put it that way. So this is good news, but it's not quite what people were expecting, and it's not like we really needed this anyway, because we know that they're already emulating and bringing back older titles. So A weird association, but it's not quite what people were thinking. But regardless, this is good news that Sony is now building a preservation team and archiving their software properly. If anything, they should have really had something like this a long time ago, but better late than never. Another somewhat related news story was a former Naughty Dog QA tester on their LinkedIn profile. Someone noticed that one of their past experiences at Naughty Dog was working on an unannounced remake, and this, made some headlines and got some people talking, but it's not, I don't know if this is really major news. I mean, of course, what we expect that is The Last of Us remake. I guess it's more evidence to it because it is still considered a rumor, but it's widely known as kind of an open secret that that's what Naughty Dog is doing, and that it could be ready very soon, or at least by sometime next year, perhaps close to the HBO show. But I would hope that it actually comes out somewhat sooner. But either way, that's likely what it is. Not exactly revealing per se. But in other Naughty Dog news, it looks like we might have a release date for the Uncharted Legacy of Thieves collection on PC, where, if you remember, we had a Steam database listing that pinned it for June 20th, and then it was taken down. And now we're seeing that same date on Epic's site, where they had a blog post for a bunch of games and their various release dates. And June 20th was on there for Uncharted until they changed it, and they set it to coming soon again. So it seems obvious that that's a tentative release date, but something where once they know they can hit it, that's probably when it's going to come out. So actually, that should be very soon. We also got an updated release window for the upcoming game of the year. I'm, of course, talking about Stray. So over on PlayStation's official Twitter account, they put up this tweet about Stray, We Are OFK, and Cult of the Lamb, and Stray is coming this summer, which is kind of, I don't know, we expected that, I guess. The game was rated in, Australia and Korea or something, so yeah, it's coming soon, and that is right around the corner, so I'm excited, can't wait, and I think we should do a Platinum Trophy walkthrough, one of those long-form Platinum Trophy videos that we like to do, assuming it's not an egregious Platinum, but I'm hoping it's very straightforward and not easy, but simple. Next up, rather surprisingly, variable refresh rate is now live on PS5. So it turns out we didn't need a new firmware update. It was in that last major one, and Sony turned it on server side. So if you're logged into PSN, you should now have this option show up in your screen and video settings. And obviously this is good to finally have, better late than never. And it's something where, as long as you've got an HDMI 2.1 compatible TV with VRR support, then you are good to go. Some HDMI 2.0 TVs do work, but it's a bit hit or miss, so I'm actually going to link a Reddit thread down below that shows what TV models are supported, just something to be mindful of, but usually it's 2.1, and obviously if you can go up to 120 hertz, that's ideal, because the amount of games that were supported to really optimize for this are fantastic. And of course, unsurprisingly, we're seeing that Insomniac Games is the leader here, where they're showcasing their beautiful games on PS5, Spider-Man, both Spider-Mans, and also Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. And actually, there's a bit of confusion here. So all games can support this, right? VRR will step in, clean up drop frames, match the frame pacing of the game, and that's where, even with drop frames, it'll look relatively smooth, right? That's what VRR does. It does it for all games, but the games that are patched, which there's actually a good handful of titles that were patched, but the games that were patched, as an example for what Insomniac Games is doing, is they're actually changing it so where if your TV is, say, 60 hertz, then your game is going to start prioritizing the dynamic resolution to hold a higher resolution. So even if you're dropping more frames, you won't necessarily notice it, right? Because those games already have a very stable frame rate, but they'll start prioritizing the dynamic res. Or if you're playing on a TV that goes up to 120 hertz, then the game's frame rate is unlocked, and based on certain situations in that game, if it's very calm, you could see your frame rate go up to 90, probably even upwards of 120 locked. And if it's obviously if there's a lot more going on screen, you could dip down to the 60s or the 30s, depending on the mode you choose. You can still do favoring fidelity or favoring frame rate, but you can now start going to frame rates above 60, and it usually hovers around what it seems like anywhere from 70 to 90 on average during gameplay, but still really cool, and that's what optimized VRR patches are doing. Remember, every game can utilize this. That's why there's a toggle for it on the PS5's UI settings. But when a game is patched for it, it can do something like this. And it's really awesome to see Insomniac once again really showing everybody how it's done. It's just, they're wizards over there. Unfortunately, though, still no fix for the auto low latency mode. Disappointing, of course, but, well, again, hopefully with enough noise, they're aware of it, and the next firmware, it will be, this will be addressed. Moving on to games and console sales via the March NPD and also Microsoft's recent earnings call, we see that PS5 stock, at least, is still not doing good at all, where it was the bottom, number 3, so Xbox Series consoles were number 1 in terms of both units and dollar sales, where they actually broke records for Xbox sales in general, dating back to, I think, units was 2011, and then dollar sales was 2014, or maybe I've got that mixed up, but yeah, they're doing pretty good. Nintendo Switch is still selling somewhat consistently, and PS5 on the bottom, stock still doing not that great. However, March NPD for game sales, first-party software is still performing strong, where you've got Gran Turismo 7 debuting at number 2, Horizon number 4. Software selling, but PlayStation 5 hardware still doing really not bad, but not necessarily great. Microsoft, on the other hand, they're definitely very happy, where the Microsoft CEO, Satya Nadella, mentioned that with the console sales, they have taken share globally for 2 quarters in a row, and were the market leader this quarter among next-gen consoles in the US, Canada, UK, and Western Europe. Essentially them saying that, hey, we outsold PS5 in these territories for the last 2 quarters. So they're quite pleased, and well, you can see it even somewhat anecdotally, where Series consoles, in fact, Series X is now somewhat regularly in stock. You can actually buy it, and it's not the most terrible thing in the world now, which is good. But PS5, it's still a huge, massive pain. But this is becoming a big issue for Sony, and it's not like they're happy about it or thrilled with it. They obviously want to get as many PS5s out there, but it's to the point where with all manufacturers now having so much momentum, you don't really want to be the odd man out of not being able to make as many consoles as the other two. That, and also, mind you, Microsoft actually outlined during their earnings call that they're expecting revenue and player engagement to dip a bit into the single digits in terms of year-over-year growth. They're expecting that to go down a bit in the next quarter because of, more console supply constraints. So it seems like there's still not really an end in sight here. So, and as we mentioned at the start of this year, it seems like this won't actually be fixed or reasonably solved until at least 2023. And even then, we're hoping it is looking really good, but that might be a bit iffy. It's just, this has been ugly across the board, but I'm sure Microsoft is definitely pleased. It's just that for Sony, you don't really want to be in this position for too long as this generation presses forward. If PS5 continues to be this huge hassle to buy, you may very well could start seeing consumers looking elsewhere. And it's not like they don't have a compelling product here. People want it, they're willing to pay for it, and they can't find it. And that's crazy considering at launch, Sony, we know that they were manufacturing these things a little bit before Microsoft, and that's why they got an early lead, and Microsoft still will not disclose worldwide numbers. And I guarantee you, if they ever say exceed the numbers that Sony has publicly disclosed, then you're going to see them start putting those numbers out there because they're proud of it. So at least right now, the only thing we know is that they're selling more than 360, which was their most successful launch aligned console. So they're doing okay in that respect. But for Sony, they're getting to a point now where if they can't keep up with stock, they certainly will start losing some market share. And to be honest, it would be theirs to lose. I mean, they're both great products, Nintendo as well, but it would be Sony's market share to lose if they don't get the stock situation in a somewhat better area or position. Now, with all that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus. The weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or Twitter, and if you would like to win a $10 PSN code, it is so easy. Follow the link down below. Supporting this channel in a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week because I'm trying to help pay for your games. those are all the stories that I wanted to talk about you all from this past week. Our Tuesday video was PS5's card system. I'm not really using it all that much, and I think most people aren't too. So why is that? Recently I dived into that feature and found it's very inconsistent. Go check it out, and as always, a new upload this coming Tuesday. But that's it. That concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.